This is slide 2 of our World War II unit. America acts, or doesn't. Depends on your definition of acting, I guess, during a time of war. But we will start with a discussion of an event known as Kristallnacht. It's a German word. Kristallnacht. It translates as the night of broken glass. The night of broken glass. It's November 9, 1938. November 9, 1938. And on this night, Germans will destroy more than 7,000 Jewish businesses and all of the country's Jewish synagogues as they begin their program of anti-Jewish behavior and actions. Over 30,000 Jews were rounded up and sent to concentration camps at the beginning of what will be known as Hitler's final solution. This is the event that really marks the beginning of the Holocaust. So Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, November 9, 1938. As German attitudes began to turn decidedly against Jews, many of them tried to flee Germany, and they headed west across the Atlantic to the United States. A number of Jewish refugees tried to get out of Germany. They tried to get out of Europe, basically. Many went to North America. There's a famous story of about 900 German Jews who, their story sort of represents the greater struggle of all Jews against Germany. These 900 Jews bought tickets on board a ship called the St. Louis, or the St. Louis. But the ship was called the St. Louis, and they left Germany and headed to Havana, Cuba. When they got there, Cuba didn't want them. They didn't have visas to get into Cuba, so Havana, Cuba refused to allow them into the country. They got back on the boat and they headed north. They went to Miami. The United States refused to allow them into the country. They headed to Canada. Canada refused to allow them into the country. Eventually, they sailed back across the Atlantic and end up getting off, a couple hundred at a time in England, in France, and Belgium, and the Netherlands, Northern Europe. They're basically right back where they started. And this was the tale many Jews, European Jews, faced. They couldn't stay where they were, but nobody wanted to take them anywhere else. So only about 150,000 Jews migrate to the United States. We don't accept a lot of them. One of the low points of American history, really, there. Okay, let's turn our attention here to the Battle of Britain, a very famous battle during the war. This is an air battle. Germany, having taken France out of the war, now turned its attention to Great Britain, and to soften up Britain before invading, Hitler wanted to wipe out its military, its defenses. So he sends in the Air Force to do that. The Battle of Britain is an air battle that occurs over Great Britain. The British were greatly outnumbered. The Germans had 2,800 planes that they committed to destroying Britain. 2,800 German planes. The British had 600. So more than 4 times as many planes the Germans had in this battle. But the Britons will end up winning this battle for 2 big reasons. One of them, and they're really of equal importance here, really. One of them is a technological reason. The British had developed radar. If you don't have enough planes to fill the skies to find out when the enemy is coming and where they're coming from, you have to have a way to find that out. And the Germans had invented, the British had invented radar. They built radar stations all along the coast. The Germans would blow them up, the British would rebuild them. So they had these radar stations that could detect German planes. So once the British knew where the Germans were coming from, what direction, and how many, what numbers they were coming in, they could get the planes they did have into the air to intercept them. Now, the British pilots turned out were better than the German ones. But really, when you're outnumbered more than 4-1, it doesn't matter how good you are. You need some help. And the invention of radar allowed the British to fight off the Germans. Another huge advantage the British had is the stupidity of Adolf Hitler. Hitler, as the Battle of Britain went on and on for several months, Hitler began to grow more and more impatient, and he changes his strategy. He had been bombing military installations, airfields, naval ports, factories, things like that. He's been bombing military targets, but he's ready to invade now, but he can't because the Air Force hasn't done its job yet. So he changes his bombing tactics. He stops bombing military targets and he starts bombing cities, figuring, I will destroy the British will to fight. When in fact it has just the opposite effect. When Hitler starts bombing cities and killing civilians, the British become more determined than ever not to give up. Air raid sirens would go off nightly, and the British would hide. They would all rush to the nearest subway station. They would head hundreds and thousands of feet underground. Okay, maybe not thousands, hundreds of feet underground into subways. The tubes, they were called. They would go underground where the bombs didn't affect them. They would hear the bombs going off overhead, but they were deep enough underground, it didn't affect them. So very few people actually died in the bombing. But what that did was it gave the British time to rebuild. It gave them time to build more planes, to fix their airfields. And eventually, Hitler will be forced to give up on his invasion plans of Great Britain. Now, while all of that's going on, the United States is, again, more determined than ever to try to stay out of this. But opinions are dividing now. We have two groups of Americans forming. One on the side of get in, one on the side of stay out. The first group is called the CDAAA. And now that stands for the Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies. And I'll say it one more time for you, but you still may need to pause and rewind. Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies. These are the people that believe we can best defend ourselves by helping our allies in Europe, specifically Britain. So these are people who want to get in the war, but if we can't get in the war, they believe the next best thing we can do is give our allies everything they need. The other group that's arguing about this is known as America First. These are the people that say we have got to stay out of this war every way we can. Put America's problems first. The most notable supporter of the America First group is Charles Lindbergh, our famous aviator from the 1920s. Lindbergh strongly urges Americans to stay out of this war. Now, on this, you'll notice again, we have another Dr. Seuss cartoon here. Remember, Dr. Seuss was in favor of getting in the war, doing everything we could to help. And he says on this platform, folks, those most perplexing people, the lads with the Siamese beard, unrelated by blood, they are joined in a manner that mystifies the mightiest minds in the land. And in this one, Dr. Seuss is drawing a direct comparison between the Nazis and America First, saying they are both accomplishing the same thing. All right, let's finish up. Franklin Roosevelt negotiates a trade here with Great Britain. He sends Great Britain 50 old World War I destroyers. Destroyer is a type of naval ship, smaller than a battleship, even smaller than a cruiser. But we have 50 old destroyers from World War I that we are just going to scrap for parts. Britain is desperate for anything they can get their hands on. So we send them 50 old destroyers, and in exchange, they give us 8 very valuable naval bases in the western Atlantic Ocean, so along the north coast of North and South America. They have 8 naval bases that we will gladly take. Always glad to get our hands on some more naval bases. So we get those, they get the destroyers, and everybody's happy. And that brings us to our last topic here. 1940, we have another presidential election coming along. Politics gets in the way of everything here, but it must go on. And in 1940, we have a very interesting problem here. Roosevelt has served 2 terms. No president has ever served more than 2 terms. But the Democrats are not going to nominate Franklin Roosevelt for an unprecedented 3rd term. So the Democrats are going to go with FDR. The Republicans are going to nominate a relative political newcomer from Indiana, a man named Wendell Willkie. Wendell Willkie, W-I-L-K-I-E. Wendell Willkie. And the interesting thing about Wendell Willkie is that even though the Republicans are nominating him, he used to be a Democrat. He had just recently switched parties. And I think the Republicans were hoping that if we nominate this guy who used to be a Democrat, maybe some Democrats will vote for him. It didn't work. The popular vote will be relatively close, but Roosevelt will win another easy electoral college vote, and for the first time, we have a 3rd-time president.